First of all, I want to thank Sulu for hosting this, giving me the opportunity to talk about this. My name is Ken, last name G, and the head of FAST. And all that stands for is Fire Action Safety Today. Holmdel's fire chief is actually here. Dave, could you just raise them, just want to recognize them. Dave was actually cited in the fire study for his work. Not only that, I just found out today that not only does he volunteer and do what he does, but his wife, his daughter is also involved. And so for that, we want to thank you. Also, there was some discussion at the last township committee meeting on this past Tuesday, and there was some, how should I say this? There was some discussion that some of the volunteer firefighters thought that some of the work that we're doing in the fire study felt like an attack or criticism of the volunteer firefighters. And sort of for the record, everybody know that that's a fire study conducted by the township, and all we're doing is sharing the findings on that. And obviously, we all appreciate all the service that not only the fire chief, but all the other volunteers have done, because God bless them. Any one of the first responders who run to risks and so on, we can't thank you guys enough. So with that, let me get started. I want to try to make it fairly quick. I'm going to talk to them about FAST, very brief history, the findings of the study, and some of the recent development, including the Township Committee this past Tuesday. And then I'll leave it as kind of Q&A, what to do now, what's next. So we're a new started nonprofit, nonpartisan group. What that means is there's no political agenda. In fact, the core members being mentioned are Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated. Our only mission is really to make sure that what's happened in the last few years doesn't continue, that hopefully we can help drive improvement in fire study, and hopefully on a timely basis. By that, that could mean 6 months, 12 months, rather than 5 years kind of thing. And we seek to do this by basically sharing information, hopefully providing input to the township committee, to other elected officials, and then to monitor actions, and some of them have already been taken and started. So a very brief history. Fire company number one, actually was started in 1917. What's interesting is it started with 37 charter members. In 2014, fire company number one was closed, and leaving just fire company number two, which is on Centerville Road, to cover pretty much most of Holmdel. At that time, we were told there was between 65 and 75 volunteer firefighters. And there may or may not have been good reason to close. There were all kinds of reasons why that was done. But I was not to criticize or ask why, but the real key was that there was no adequate backup plan with that closing. So the fire study. This was announced in May of last year. The actual work started in August, conducted by an outside consultant, Dr. Harry Carter, who's reasonably known in that field, his experience as a former fire chief and so on. And then in end of January, a 57-page study was officially released. Some of the key findings of this talks about the need for additional staffing, the absence of the standard operating procedure and training, talks a little bit about ISO, talks a little bit about fire station response time, and some of the other things, but in particular, the need for additional equipment. I'll go through a little bit of these, each by one. Staffing needs. The study officially cites 35 as the active number of volunteers. Again, remember, it was down from 65 to 75 a few years ago. The report cites that very little are Holmdel residents. Part of it just reflects our community. Part of it reflects the national trend. Gone are the old days where you had neighborhood stores, you had a liquor store, hardware store, whatever. You got people who are commuting, going out of town and taking New York City. It also talks about Holmdel. So part of it is that we're a reasonably wealthy town. The cost of housing is fairly high, reasonably high income residents. And because of that, now this is all from the study, because Because of all that, there's a preference for volunteering, for coaching and sports and so on, which is fantastic. Well, on the other hand, the report says that because of the nature of that mix of people, that not as many people come up to be firefighter volunteers because of the dirty, dangerous, and time-consuming nature of volunteering firefighter. The study also cites a number of deficient staffing situations in actual responses. That there's been a number of incidents where there was not sufficient number of people actually responding to an emergency call. And then it went on to say that this situation should be closely monitored. It continued to say that demographic works against us. The ideal age bracket for recruiting, not necessarily continuing, but in terms of recruiting new entrants, is between age 18 to 25. According to the study, we have 4.3% of Holmdel population that's between 19 and 25. Now, I know there's some
Those numbers can't be correct.
Well,
They're more than that in the school
system. There's one question here, whether that number is right or not. So all I'm doing right now is
7.9%
reporting
is
to
not
what the
correct.
study says. We can go into some of that later as we hopefully understand this stuff. The other key is half of the people in Holmdel are age 45 and above, which is not likely to be volunteers for this kind of work. So, according to the study, Dr. Carter says, according to his research and experience, he thinks that we should continue and put an emphasis to recruit additional firefighters on a volunteer basis. But based on his experience, he doesn't feel that we're going to be successful in doing that. And then he would suggest that we plan, you know, the word is plan, develop some sort of backup plan in case that's not successful. It talks about standard operating procedures, which is lacking. Hopefully that's not corrected, because he did provide, as part of the study, a standard set of operating procedures which would be adopted. He also mentioned that there's a need to say that the members and officers should continue to increase an emphasis on training. And in particular, there's a need to get to a point where all officers and members have the necessary training to perform the operational duties. This is key because one of the things we don't realize, on the average, in the last 3 years, there's been around 400 emergency calls. So this is not an isolated incident. If you don't have the proper training and so on, it could have potential impact on the frequency of things. One of the things that the study mentioned, which is kind of unknown to a lot of people, there's a very little-known organization called Insurance Services Office, ISO. They provide statistics, risk management, risk analytics to the insurance industry. They actually provide a community fire rating to Holmdel and a bunch of towns. And that's used by a number of insurance companies as part of their underwriting, setting the premium rates for homeowner policy. Holmdel has a fire rating of 6/6X, which is a fair to middle grade. The rating is from 1 to 10, with 1 being the best and 10 is the worst. This rating is not normally available to the public, it's not normally made known to the public, but the fire study did make known of this to us and we shared this.
But it's known to the insurance companies.
It's known to the insurance company, but it's not known to the general public.
What is the value?
And the rates have been going up.
Okay.
Can you repeat the value again?
So-
It was 6?
Among the different areas mentioned in the report, of this ISO report, is that in one of the areas, specifically the fire department, again, this is from the fire study, I'm just passing on the information, it's not judging or anything like that. But Holmdel earned 17 points out of possible 50. They said, obviously, this rating is not very good. The emergency reporting, telecommunication, dispatch system are areas that needs improving. Fire stations. Officially, we have 2 fire. Can we save the question for a little later?
Sure.
I'll run through as much as I can. Officially, I mentioned 2 fire stations. One that everybody kind of knows on Centerville, but there's another one on Crawford Porter's Road. However, most of the, I think, responses tends to come from the Centerville Road. At least according to the study, It cites that the apparatus located at Crawford's Corner Road rarely responds. However, in either case, both of the firehouses are not equipped to be a sort of main firehouse in terms of facilities, room, and so on. It mentioned things have to be stored either in the shed or outside, causing freezes and things like that. So Dr. Carter says, I recommend that Holmdel Township explore the development of a station more centrally located within the township. So we haven't quite taken a position yet. It's not clear yet, at least to me, maybe some of the other members have passed, that that is a more optimal solution to have one centrally located versus maybe two. One in the northern, one in the southern. So I'm going to leave that on, but that, Dr. Carter's recommendation. Response time. This is the time from when an emergency call is made to the time where a fire equipment is on scene. Dr. Carter mentioned that there is a national standard that for volunteer fire department, the recommended on scene and operating is 12 minutes. And then he went on to say that it's been his observation that this time falls within roughly 1.5 miles geographically in terms of radius from the fire station, and that 1.5 miles for a pump response, and that's a requirement under ISO as part of their analysis. Holmdel roughly has 18 square miles, not quite a perfect square. So you can kind of figure out roughly, if you're in the exact middle of Holmdel, you're roughly about, as the crow flies, 4 miles to the outside border. So that puts in perspective the 1.5 miles. It talks very briefly, even though it doesn't get a lot of credit, that there's some systems and telecommunication and things that ought to be looked at and improved upon. Finally, apparatus. So these are the fire engine, fire trucks, aerial ladders, and so on. These are the existing equipment, most of them I believe are at fire station at Centerville. It refers to specific numbers. Fire engine 1875, which was built in 1992. So this is the year in that the equipment is built, and this is Dr. Carter's recommendation. You can see that there's one, the arrow ladders needs to be replaced as soon as possible. Again, this is his recommendation. Fire engine 1875 should be replaced in 2019. Another one should be refurbished and then replaced 8 years later. And then fortunately, we have one that doesn't need to be refurbished until 2024. There was also a discussion, I believe, with the fire chief that we should add a smaller pumping unit for single-family homes with steep driveways and so on, and that was in his recommendation to add that as well. So not surprisingly, knowing sort of what his findings are, these are his key recommendations. First one is, again, concerted effort to recruit staff for fire company number 2. It goes on to say that based on experience, if the efforts are not successful, we need to think about a backup plan. And his recommendation is a career staff to supplement the volunteer staff. Sorry.
When you say career staff, you mean paid firefighters?
Sorry, career staff is full-time paid staff.
Thank you for clarifying.
Adopt the standard operating procedures, some of the additional guidelines and things like that. It talks about training, so obviously increased training. Properly establish a duty crew operation. Relocate to a centrally located fire station. With allowance for adequate storage, kitchen, bathrooms for both sexes. Right now that's not available. And a meeting room. Right now in fire station, I think it was mentioned that there's really no space, and they try to make use of space between 2 fire trucks in there. Last point was to implement the equipment, in particular fire engines, immediately. So that includes buying a new fire truck, refurbishing another one until 2019. Just some of you know, there's been a few fires, and I'm not putting up here to incite anything, but in 2014, in December 2015, there was one in Hopbrook Lane. Now, the Asbury Park Press reported it was 15 minutes before the firefighters were seen putting water to flame. There was another earlier this year at Blue Hills Drive, and there were 21 minutes after the call was received. So what's happened since then? So that's all the fire study and the findings of Dr. Carter. Well, since then, a number of residents got together, formed a small group, and one of them actually made an Oprah request to get some additional information. And one of them we discovered is that Holmdel actually received an official notice from ISO in 2017 that it will be downgraded unless certain improvements were made in the next 12 months. And in fact, we were downgraded in 2018. Anecdotally, we had one resident actually check with the insurance company that his homeowner insurance premium did go up by 25% because of the fire rating downgrade. The ISO report that we got also said there was a deployment analysis that makes the determination. It looks at the percentage of area that's within 1.5 miles, this goes back to the earlier point that I made, of the first two fire engine company, but also it mentioned 2.5 miles of the first two ladder service company. The reason these numbers are important, remember, Holmdel has 18 square miles. If you go sort of roughly the middle of Holmdel, you're approximately 4 miles as the crow flies, not counting out the street bills, from the middle of that to your outskirt. So that's 4 miles versus 1.5 and 2.5 miles that they looked at. The second development was that Dr. Carter wrote not only a central location, but maybe staffing with 5 to 6 career paid firefighters that can respond immediately. There was a township committee on February 12th, and there was a discussion whether that's wise or not wise in terms of having a full-time paid professional staff. 2 days after that, an official statement was issued. The township is not ready to consider hiring or paid fire safety personnel. The township is going to make targeted investment in our facilities, equipment, and apparatus, and that they're going to actively push to grow the volunteer fire company number 2. The good news is that there's at least 4 new volunteers. I understand from the chief that's gone up now. It's now up to
10.
You have 10?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
That's really fantastic news. So it's working. That's the good news. He also mentioned there's a game plan. Part of the game plan is to emphasize fire prevention. So that makes sense, obviously. The more fires you don't have, the less fire response you need. Enhanced training and better communications. They also announced that they plan as part of, right now the township's going through its budget process. I don't think it's officially finalized yet, because typically in April is when they put up the agenda for official approval, public gets to comment on it and so on, but there's enough work done. I think the mayor said that we're going to plan for additional 1 fire truck. It won't be a new one, it will be a used one. I don't know how the fire chief feels about that, but there is a savings, a little bit of money, but also possibly in delivery. I don't know if that precludes the need for a new fire truck or not, but that is in the budget. The mayor also announced there is a new centralized firehouse going to be at Bell Works. This will be, most of you know, Bell Works, the developer is Somerset. They've, not all the details have been worked out, but they said Somerset and Ralph Zucker in particular sort of have some agreement in principle. And that the township committee will, in future meetings, put up for discussion and ask for public comment the concept of a fire district. Now, for those of you who don't know, New Jersey have legislatures and law that permits a municipality like Holmdel to designate certain area of the town to be a fire district. And what that means is that the responsibility for fire safety and prevention will be under a board of 5 commissioners, which normally would be elected at typically November. Sometimes it used to be in February, but it could be November and so on. And they would have 100% of the responsibility of fire prevention, fire safety, but also developing a budget in terms of the dollars that may be needed as part of that responsibility. So that's something that the Township Committee is putting out there. And so hopefully you folks would be able to attend the Township Committee meetings, provide input. So in a way that kind of takes the responsibility outside of the Township Committee. For those who don't know, one of our Township Committee members back there, Mike Nicholas. And so correct me if there's any issues here that either I'm not agreed to or what, but there's going to be a discussion open for public input where that's something that residents of Township of Holmdel would want, is a fire district. So that kind of, if we do go with that, and I don't have a position, I haven't been passed as a position yet, that does take the responsibility away from the Township Committee into this Board of 5 commissioners. And if they do go that, the budget for that will be a separate line item. So right now, you got taxes for municipality, Board of Ed, library, and whatever. In theory, if we went that route, there would be another item. Fire safety, fire prevention, fire department, whatever. Now, this is a new development, so we do have some questions, concerns, because obviously now all the details are ironed out. It's a free firehouse at Bellworks. Most of you are old enough to know there's probably no free lunch. So what's in it? It's been mentioned that Bellworks will be allowed to develop 200 new apartments. They're relatively small apartments, 1 bedroom, 600 to 700 square feet. It will be in the back of Bellworks. The new apartments, unfortunately, will have no strings attached to them. So what that means is that some of you may follow, Holmdel, like all towns, have an obligation to provide affordable housing to low to moderate income. You've got to make that available, and there's a requirement. Right now, there's a big plan. In fact, there's a fairness hearing coming up on April 4th by the judge. The township is in active litigation to get approval for a plan. These new apartments will not be part of that because there's not part of any affordable housing plan. What we don't know yet, again, details need to be worked out, is that the firehouse is technically on private property, Bellworks. Beyond the initial construction cost, it's not clear exactly are there any ongoing funding requirements by the township, are there any lease payments, are there maintenance clauses, are there any stuff. For those of you who know commercial developers, it's very common when they get a major tenant, commercial tenant, they build to spec. You know, if you're a Kmart versus a Saks Fifth Avenue, you have different requirements. The developer will build that according to your needs, but then they make it up in the lease payments. So depending what the arrangement is, you know, it's not unusual for developers to try to recoup their cost plus profit in terms of any future payments. So that's something we need to be mindful of. Bellworks, I know people kind of know about that, but I don't know if anyone you've driven through there. There's no easy direct access from point A to point B. This is Crawford's Corner Road. This is Middletown Road. And for those who don't know, Bell Lab was developed consciously as a transistor. So when this was first, the building was first being built, they got vacuum tubes and so on, and then came along the invention of transistors. So they actually developed, you look at this thing, this is a transistor. But when you come in Crawford's Corner Road, depending which direction you come in here, you got to drive through here, come here, and there's all kind of what I call roundabout. There's no easy point. You kind of have to make a right and a left and go around before you get to the parking lot where you want to go. The reason I bring that up is It's something of a concern, at least I have. One of the options not discussed so far is what we have, Holmdel Township have an existing facility at Crawford's Corner Road. It houses some fire apparatus right now. Right now, as far as I can tell, there's been no discussion whether we should renovate that. Maybe they have, county committee members tell us about that, but that location does have better ingress and egress. In other words, that's located literally right off Crawford's Corner Road. You come out of the fire station, you make a left or right, and boom, you're on the street and you get where you're going. If you're in Bell Works, one of the concerns I have is, if you're a volunteer firefighter, if you're not at the station, just to get in there takes you 5 minutes. And to get out may take you 5 minutes as well too, so that's a concern. The estimated cost, we believe, is about $1.5 million. Holmdel has actually close to 6,000 housing units. So if you kind of divide that number, $1.5 million by 5,000 or 6,000, the average cost is $300 per housing unit. And we fund that by bond ordinance, spread that over 10 years. That cost is actually might be closer to $30 per year per household. So this is last year's capital budget, and I just put up here, with no judgment, you guys can figure out on your own. For road improvement, we budget $2.5 million, and the plan for the next 5 years is $8.5 million. For vehicles and equipment, so most of this, I believe, is DPW.
Police.
$544,000 and roughly $4 million for the next 5 years.
It's also police cars.
Improvement in parks, $3 million for 2018, roughly 2.9, and 3.4 million for the next 5 years. Police emergency service, $326,000, $327,000, and $1.7 million next 5 years. The fire department was $41,000, and for the next 5 years, $291,000. This was the actual budget that was cited in the report. So 2015 had a budget of $47,000, $47,000, and then $60,000.
Out of them soccer field.
So, that's a summary of the fire study. A little bit of Dr. Carter's recommendations, some of the recent developments. Clearly, the township's taking this very seriously. There's been a flurry of announcements. Now what, right? The first thing is, to the extent that you have any input, any concerns, whatever, especially with township committee here, fire chief is here, or certainly other township committee members, express any issues or any concerns you may have. What I would love to do, when we're starting to get this, by the way, is to get an update, not just on the real time from the fire chief being in the room here, but updates on the additional recruits, if we could, because that would be fantastic. Commitment in terms of a centrally located, whether that's at Bellworks or somewhere else, by X date, right? Sounds like they're moving along that path, but I think it's important to get some kind of commitment to do that. I don't know what the magic date is, whether it's 6 months, a year, whatever, but hopefully not 5 years. Commitment for capital improvement. You saw that there was need for equipment, whether that's a used fire truck, new fire truck, other fire truck that needs to be refurbished. Updates in equipment and so on. Commitment for additional training, that takes money, but also personnel commitment. And budget for all these. Right now, the budget doesn't appear. I don't know what's going on with the latest budget, but certainly last year, doesn't appear there's a lot of money provided for that. And then attend township committee meetings. Give your input as to the concept of fire districts and so on. So with that, let me open up for questions. One hand is already up.